Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Donut Hole, your place where a couple of guys sit around and pontificate. My name's Paul,
And I'm Jason.
and we're coming at you from our studios here in Nashville on this nice, lovely, sunny, yet slightly windy February morning, or afternoon, really.
Yeah.
So, real quick correction to something we talked about in one of our prior podcasts, our prior shows, would be that actually, it is 2 years for the House of Representatives. We were uncertain, and we were kind of, anyway, slight correction on that. So anyway, Jason, let's go ahead and get down to the nitty-gritty of today's show. We got a nice meaty one planned for everybody because the last couple have been not so great, a little short.
A little short, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I think the first thing we're going to talk about is kind of keep it local for a moment and talk about the flooding and what have you that we've had here in Nashville and all the rain.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was foremost on my mind. I was driving home last night from any of you who are familiar with the Nashville area. Long Hollow Pike is a fairly rural area, and the flash flooding had started to come up over the roads, and the water running down the driveways were like rivers. And I actually passed at least 10 emergency vehicles. Several of them were towing Zodiac boats. They had several side roads closed, so it was a pretty intense little drive home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we've had rain pretty much nonstop, more or less, for like the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it's getting up. I think you said even the dams, as far as letting the water out, were up higher than normal too.
Yeah, they're letting out a lot more water than they have to. They're just having to open the spill gates and get it drained off somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we've had, I don't know the exact number, but it's 12 point something, approaching 13 inches of rain this month.
Yeah, which is a fair amount. And the worst thing too is we get these flash floods here because the water comes down so rapidly that there's no place for it to go. It can't absorb into the ground. We got a lot of like limestone and crap under the surface of the soil, so it'll go down so far and then it'll kind of slide under the surface, and it just will pool up and then slide into the roads, and then next thing you know, you've got this giant river running down the street.
Yeah, what you think is just a field can turn into a pond real quick.
Yeah,
and I mean within 30 minutes. That's what I was experiencing last night, and no doubt all those Zodiac boats I saw were going somewhere. There was people doing the same thing I was. I was driving through it, but I know the area. I knew the roads. But some people that and I was in a vehicle that obviously has a lot more ground clearance. But that's one thing people definitely need to watch out for.
Yeah. So if you guys are out there driving around in it, stay safe. So, also, they kind of note the fact that, because I know we had a really bad flood here in Nashville in 2010. I mean, we've, millions, I think maybe even billions of dollars of property damage.
Yes.
Ensued. And they called it like the once in 1,000-year flood or some ridiculous thing like that. But it turns out that isn't the case historically.
No, now the rainfall now has to be more to get those kind of floods because we have the dams and the flood control, Percy Priest Lake and Old Hickory Dam. But I was looking at it last night just out of curiosity, and it hit the 52-foot mark, I believe, in the flood of 2010. And I was looking at the early in the 1900s. There were several times it hit 56 feet, so flooded even worse than it did in 2010. It's several times, 4 or 5 times early in the century.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things people don't talk about. I mean, granted, like you said, it does have to be much worse to get those numbers than it had to be in the past. But definitely.
But definitely historically a danger for Nashville, and it is one of those things that's happened in the past, and as we see, continues to happen. It's nowhere near as bad as 2010 because thankfully those 12 inches of rain were spread out over several weeks, even I would say 3 weeks. Whereas in 2010 it was pretty much 3 days. We had about 8 inches come down in 3 days. And that's when it was devastating. But it hasn't been too bad on the actual flooding here, but the flash flooding was pretty bad.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of weather-related things, I'm going to be delighted. You're going to be a little miffed, but apparently with the Groundhog Day or what have you, it's going to be spring soon.
Early spring, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm delighted. I'm sure you're not, but...
I thought it might be just from noticing the trees. I noticed there's buds coming out on the trees already. I noticed I'm probably going to have to start mowing some grass here pretty soon.
Yeah.
So I do look forward to spring, though. It's definitely a great time to go and do all the outdoor activities that I enjoy doing.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things we kind of contest a little bit. You like the colder weather, I like the warmer weather.
Yeah, but I mean, I think everybody loves spring and fall.
Yeah.
It's I don't like summer and you don't like winter.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But I think spring and fall will both can
Yeah,
tolerate.
spring and fall are great. Yeah, absolutely my favorite.
Alrighty, guys. Well, let's take another quick break, or take a quick break, I should say, and we'll get to you guys right after the commercials. Alrighty, guys, we're back from the quick break. So let's move it along. Let's go ahead and start talking about some Trump derangement syndrome things that are in the news lately.
Yes.
Where do you want to start with this one? You want to talk about the?
Well, let's start with the Out magazine, LGBT publication. Apparently wrote an article because Trump's doing a campaign to decriminalize homosexuality throughout the world. Something I wouldn't think anybody can argue with.
Yeah, it seems like a good, general purpose thing.
Yeah.
Where you fall, whether you support, homosexuality in your personal life or not, or it's part of public policy. I don't think you think people should be executed for it.
Absolutely. I mean, even people. I mean, Christians don't believe it's a sin, but they absolutely don't want people to be executed for it.
Yeah.
So this is a good policy. It's decriminalizing it. But apparently, Out magazine, which is a gay publication, has said somehow this is racist.
Wait. So, an LGBTQ publication is saying that decriminalization of homosexuality is racist.
Apparently so.
That's a fun one. I mean, that's kind of a really awkward stance for them,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah.
What's their thoughts on this? Because I know Trump's trying to, like you said, decriminalize it, particularly in the Middle East, where, in some of these countries, it's known to, execute or life imprisonment for gays and throwing them off rooftops and stuff like that as part of, national policy. And to come out and say, this is something which should be changed. And for the gays to say, this gay publication to say, oh, this is a bad thing.
Or even involving race in it whatsoever. I don't know how racism is involved at all. But it's one of those things that, I had picked up on and read several articles from other news sources. I did not read the actual article, so I want to say that as a disclaimer. But it doesn't, I mean, if you're making the statement that it's racist in the first place, I don't really need to read your article because it's probably a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah.
It's just, once again, just Trump derangement syndrome is you hate the man so bad that even if he does something that's positive, you spin it into a negative. Which makes me think it would be very easy for him to win many elections. He could just say, don't vote for me. And they hate him so bad, they'll do the opposite.
Yeah, it's getting about to that point because, obviously if a major gay publication is saying, hey, throwing gays off roofs is a good thing, because they hate Trump so bad, and that's just ridiculous.
It is. It really is.
Then I guess let's talk about, move forward with some of this Trump derangement syndrome that's in the news. I know there's also the notion of, the actor was named Jussie
Smollett.
Jussie Smollett, yeah. Who allegedly has now faked his own, attack by Trump supporters.
Yes.
Which is kind of ridiculous.
Yes.
That he hates Trump so bad that he's going to fake a hate crime just to...
And he sent himself a letter, apparently by a Trump supporter, with a powdered white substance in it. Ended up being aspirin. Just, an attention-grabbing... who knows what's going through the guy's mind? Obviously, he's got a screw loose.
Mm-hmm.
But, faking a crime against you to garner sympathy is one thing. But he obviously targeted it towards Trump supporters.
Yeah.
And the media also they ran with this thing because it made Trump supporters look bad.
Mm-hmm.
But, from the very beginning, I even thought this sounds a little off.
Yeah.
Because they're in Chicago, Illinois, of all places. And
for the attackers to say, this is Trump country in Chicago. It's like, now if he were in, I don't know, I'm trying to think about really kind of, somewhere in Arkansas.
Florence, Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that, then, yeah, okay, maybe.
Right.
But not saying that, it would happen or that it would be good, but
It's
Chicago.
more believable.
It's a lot more plausible than downtown Chicago, Illinois, being Trump country. That's not.
Oh, apparently the two guys he hired to do the hoax
Mm-hmm.
couldn't find MAGA hats, so they just simply purchased red baseball hats because they couldn't find any in Chicago.
Which only shows you how much of Trump country it really is.
Yeah. And like I said, the hate crime part of it was probably his cry for attention, get some sympathy. He was apparently afraid he was going to be written off the show he was on. But that targeting it towards Trump supporters in that segment of the population was him targeting them specifically.
Yeah, it definitely was. And we've seen this kind of lunacy coming out of, the left before with what's her face, Kathy
Griffin.
Yeah, with Kathy Griffin, with her, beheading of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen it a little bit on the right as well with like Roseanne, where she went a little nuts. But of course, she went a little nuts and got the book thrown at her, where both Kathy and this Jussie Smollett guy, they're gonna get off with a slap on the wrist.
And like you said, it happens on the right too, but it's generally not as high profile. Because I do remember when there was, I can't remember who exactly did it. It was a church, I believe, of some sort. Made a doll of Obama and hung him in effigy.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously very inappropriate.
Yeah.
And so that stuff does happen. But also at the same time, that was not a member of Hollywood or the media who was being celebrated for it on TV.
No, it was just some idiot.
Right.
So there's a bit of a difference at the end of the day. Speaking of some idiots, let's go ahead and move over to moving it along now to the I believe there was a kind of an undercover sting, if you will, with over at UCLA. Somebody kind of infiltrated the university, and pretended to be very left-leaning, and was going around taking a poll of various of the students and faculty and what have you, and suggesting that Trump supporters be locked up and thrown in internment or concentration camps.
Yes.
So,
once again, Trump derangement syndrome to the extreme. They were the ones calling Trump Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, who's proposing concentration camps?
Yeah.
And they're not only proposing concentration camps for, say, political prisoners, no, they're proposing it for 50% of the general population.
Mm-hmm.
I say 50%. I mean, that number is not exact, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty crazy stuff.
Now, granted, the whole thing was done as an expose anyway, so it's not like people, the left was initially pushing this.
But the shocking thing is people signed the petition.
Yeah, that is the shocking thing. People did sign the petition, and that the Trump derangement syndrome, it exists to that degree, to where somebody can say, I think that Trump supporters are so bad we should put them in concentration camps, and others are like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
And then sign their name to it.
Right.
That's pretty dicey, and that's just kind of showing.
Well, that's kind of how you get Nazi Germany. I mean, I'm not trying to make the comparisons like the left says of Trump, but that's how it happens. Is you get these cultural currents that are so strong that even though they would never personally put someone in a concentration camp, they're going to look the other way when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened in Nazi Germany.
Oh, of course.
And the fact that, and I'm sure it's a very small portion of these college kids. I'm sure there was some cherry picking. Because you know how these exposés go. It doesn't tell the whole story. But the fact that anybody would sign something like that is shocking.
Yeah, exactly. It's really just kind of showing the total lines of division that are within the United States right now, and how, like I said, how divisive it is, and just the sad state of affairs in general.
Mm-hmm.
So, definitely not good.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunately too. It's these college kids that are being indoctrinated. They're going to have to get out into the real world and get a job one day, and it's not serving them well either.
No,
coming out and being completely radicalized by colleges, and not understanding what it's like to work and raise a family and earn money. It's sad for them as well.
Yeah, it really is. Hopefully, this changes in the future, but I don't see it changing anytime soon, unfortunately.
Not anytime soon. No, I don't think so. Until the university system starts to change.
Alrighty. Well, let's not go to break on a sour note like that. Let's make it a little bit more uplifting. Let's move along to the next thing. I believe you're the one that mentioned this to me earlier. Israel launched their first spaceship into orbit, didn't they?
Yeah, that's going to the moon. So I believe it was done rather cheaply too, under $100 million.
Yeah,
So
kudos.
compared to what NASA spends, great success.
Yeah,
Good for them.
yeah. So congratulations to Israel on your space launch, I suppose.
Yeah,
That's
congratulations.
good. So I think that's going to be a much more positive note
Yeah,
to end the segment on.
that's right. Yeah.
We'll get back to you guys here shortly after the break.
Hi, I would like to take a minute to tell you a bit about Hero Song. Hero Song is a 501c3 non-for-profit organization set up to record the music of veterans, active duty, and first responders who also have musical ambitions. Music is great for the soul, and that's what makes us unique and ever so wonderful. Please check them out and consider giving them your support. Again, that's at herosong.org. Thanks.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back from the break here. So, Jason, let's go ahead and start talking back into the meat and potatoes of our show. So, I think we're going to talk a bit about some of the protests that are happening around the world.
Mm-hmm.
We obviously know that, Venezuela's still in chaos.
Yeah.
Really, that's the only way to put it. It's in utter chaos right now. So, protests are still happening there. There's obviously the two factions fighting. What are your thoughts on that?
Just the inevitable consequence of socialism. I mean, it happens every time. The oil prices dropped largely due to fracking in the U.S., and, there went their economy.
Yeah.
Centralized planning of an economy is never a good thing.
No, it's not. And the funny thing is, Venezuela used to be a thriving economy, and actually probably the most thriving economy in South America.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the back in the 1950s and 60s,
Mm-hmm.
they were doing phenomenally. And then it was once the oil companies were nationalized. What is it? 3-4 decades later. Now look at them.
Yeah.
They're in shambles.
Yeah, apparently, I mean, people are to the point where they're eating zoo animals, breaking into zoos. It's that bad. And then, of course, you've had this, I don't recall the name of the challenger who's claiming he's the rightful president.
Mm-hmm.
And, Maduro's making these speeches to the American people of, Donald Trump is just targeting us. And, it's just ridiculous that he would even try to blame the world for his problems.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the UN agreed. Now, there are several who are pro-Maduro, but most of them agreed that, yeah, we need to get this other guy in. We need to move towards helping these people somehow, which the first step would be removing Maduro.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the first step, regardless whether you support the new opposition party or not.
Yeah.
Something's got to change because people are doing really poorly there.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got inflation happening at such a rapid rate that by the time somebody gets paid and collects their paycheck, it's not worth half of what it was worth when they started work that morning. Even if they're getting paid every day, it happens almost on a daily basis, like 2 times inflation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's ridiculous. I mean, affording a loaf of bread now is insane.
Right.
So,
and I don't know what it is about socialism and communism that seems to bring about dictators, but it absolutely does. And that's what you've seen there. That's what we've seen in Cuba. That's what we've seen. I mean, anywhere where you have socialism as an economic system take over.
Yeah, exactly. And also, let's talk about, speaking of protests around the world, there's, of course, the Yellow Vesters are still happening in France, which is something that is kind of been absent from the news media lately. What are your thoughts on that?
It's I understand where they're coming from, but also some of their demands are pushing even further than, left of where they want these guaranteed wages and whatnot. And there seems to be a disconnect with them to me. What they were protesting originally was the fuel prices went up because of the Paris Accords.
Yeah.
Making it very difficult for the smaller people to do business, delivery trucks and whatnot, and it made it prohibitive. So they protested that. But then if you look at their demands, they're protesting more government interference, which caused the fuel prices to rise. But yet on some of their demands, they want more government. So I don't really understand. And it's a very disparate movement. There's not really a single leader. I think overall it's a good thing when the people say, hey, we can't make a living this way. We're going to take action. We're not going to let the government run over us. But at the same time, it's a little scattered and discombobulated. That's the way I see it.
No, I think you see this actually, and you see this a lot with the youth in the United States, particularly the youth on the left in the United States, the ones that are kind of more your Ocasio-Cortez supporters, not the ones necessarily supporting all the social justice causes, but the ones that think, yeah, freedom, and kind of your Bernie Sanders supporters as well, right? The ones that think, yeah, I want to make money and be successful, but I, want the government to provide me all these free things. There's that disconnect where people don't realize that the more government has to provide you your free things, the more they're interfering in your ability to actually make money and be successful. So there is that. And and this is something where when I'm talking to some of my leftist friends, we'll agree on like a lot of the problems. It's like, yeah, this is a problem, that's a problem. But they also don't seem to grasp the full entirety of the situation.
Right.
They don't seem to grasp that by wanting all these free things, most of the time they're really interfering in their ability to be successful, which they all want to be. And they're all really, a lot of them are upset because they went to college and they don't have squat for a job when they get out. And then on the flip side, they're like, so the government should, raise the minimum wage and do this, that, and the other. It's like, well, without addressing monetary policy, first, raising the minimum wage is nothing. You're just, kicking the can down the road, making it worse.
Right.
So,
well, it's taking the college thing as a perfect example. A free market solution is very easy at the colleges. There's only so many college jobs, and this was kind of a lie I felt that was told to your generation specifically, and that if you just go get a college degree, you're going to get a great job, you're going to retire, everything's going to be great. Well, there's only so many of those jobs out there.
Exactly.
And college has become prohibitively expensive. It used to make sense. You go to college, and even if you were, say, just, teacher or a nurse or something like that, which a nurse still makes good money, but it made sense because college was fairly affordable. In the 70s and 60s and 80s, it started going up, but even still, it was still somewhat affordable. And you could get a job that was just a middle-class paying job, and it made sense. But college has become so expensive that you have to make a high salary to justify the cost of going to college.
Exactly.
So the free market solution for me, and I've said for many years, if people would just stop, but they keep enrolling at record rates, even though the prices keep going up, well, that's simple supply and demand. And if you just stopped enrolling, say there was a nationwide protest, people got together and stopped enrolling in colleges for 2 years, you'd see massive change. I guarantee you those rates would drop dramatically. But it seems like nobody understands that free market solution is price is high right now, let's hold off till the price goes down. But yet the enrollment continues to grow. So, and it's simple supply and demand. As long as the demand is there, the prices are going to rise.
That's actually a really good idea. Maybe somebody with social media could actually start a protest and do just that, and actually, get all these kids to say, enough's enough.
Yeah.
And that's a good idea.
Like I said, just 2 years. And they would change. They'd change their tune very quickly.
Yeah. Not a terrible idea.
And so, like you said, free market solutions we all agree that college tuition is a problem. I don't think the government stepping in and telling a college you can only charge this is the solution.
No.
The solution is the consumer saying, your product's not worth it.
Yeah. Especially when there's so many other options to study other places. You don't have to study in the United States and still get a decent education, and even one that's affordable. There's a lot of world-class universities all over the world. Plus, then you get the fun experience of having lived abroad, which is always a plus.
Well, I believe Tennessee has free community college now, don't they? They passed that.
I'm not sure. I didn't go to college here, so
I'm fairly certain they recently passed that. I know it was a big thing, and so that's always a good idea. Whereas a lot of students think they have to go to a big-name university to get these jobs, but I have talked to employers that do require degrees, and they don't care if it's from Vanderbilt or if it's from UT. Now going into a law firm, something like that may be a different story.
Yeah. But
just your run-of-the-mill college jobs, like say you're a teacher or something, there's no reason to go to a more expensive university. Go to 2 years of community college, and then find a relatively affordable state school.
Yeah. Well, it's something actually, because I went to college in Florida, and that's something they had is if you went to like a 2-year school, which I did. You're guaranteed placement into any of the state schools upon graduating from the 2-year school.
Okay.
So you get your associate's degree. Like I got mine from what was called Edison College at the time in Fort Myers. And once you graduate from college there, the state you are guaranteed a place in a state school. as long as you apply and make the still have like I think it's C average or what have you.
Sure.
You can apply, get accepted, you're good.
Mm-hmm.
It's like guaranteed acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, you graduate with your bachelor's degree from the 4-year institution, even though you did 2 years somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a guaranteed transfer.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. But I think once again, a lot of these students have bought the lie that you have to go to the best university.
Yeah.
I had several people that I worked with that were young waitresses that wanted to get into nursing programs, and they'd say, "Well, I have to go to this school. They have a great nursing program." And I would ask them, "Is that going to help you get a job?" They said, "No, not really, but it's a really great program. But they're going to pay triple for it." Why would you make that decision?
Yeah, you really only want to do that when it comes to very specialized fields.
Mm-hmm.
And nursing is kind of right on that cusp where it's probably not going to be worth it. Now, I'm not saying go get a nursing degree from the absolute lousiest school you can. That's obviously you want to know what you're doing. But, when you're talking about like the prestige and value of like a high name school, if you're going to go to study engineering, for example,
sure,
by all means, try to get into MIT. That's going to be fantastic. Law at Columbia, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah. Well, it's I listened to Ben Shapiro, and it's like he said, if they tell you when you go into Harvard Law School, you've already made it. Yeah, they're like this. The fact that you're even going here, you've already made it.
Mm-hmm.
So in something like that, yes, absolutely. But in a lot of just your run of the mill accounting degrees, things like that, there's no reason to go to a prestigious school.
No, as long as you can just get through it, and that's all that really matters at that point.
And let's be honest, a lot of the professors at like say Middle Tennessee State are just as smart as the professors at Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they didn't get that job for one reason or another. I'm sure a lot of it's political and who you know.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean the professors are worse or the curriculum's worse. As a matter of fact, I think MTSU is considered one of the best physics programs in the country.
Yeah.
Which is one of our smaller state schools here in Tennessee. So, doing research to that level helps too on specifics. And you can catch those schools that are not very expensive that do have fantastic programs like that.
Yeah. And that's really the kicker is finding a good program at an expensive location, unless you're going for that, like I said, engineering or something crazy like that, or law or what have you, where it's like, okay, well, you go to Harvard Law, congratulations, you can get a job pretty much anywhere. You just walk in and say, hey, here's my degree from Harvard Law. When do I start?
Yeah. And that's not just being a lawyer. You could get a job doing consulting work, whatever. Here's my degree from Harvard Law. Here's your job. You're already the elite.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is that, but beyond
1% of 1%.
Exactly. That's the exception of the rule. So, anyway, here on the Donut Hole, we always try to, call balls and strikes. So when, one side does something great, we say, kudos. And when, one side does something wrong, we call them out on it. And as much as I, and I'm sure you as well, just absolutely despise Dianne Feinstein, Feinstein, whatever. Especially when it comes to like her gun control policies. That's my big one.
Big sticker with me. Yeah,
yeah, that's the one that really cooks my goat, if you will. She recently came out in opposition to the Green New Deal when it came to a bunch of students coming into her office and giving her a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I thought, it was actually politically courageous. I will give her credit for that. Because you know how popular it is, and this is the right or left both. It was middle school and high school students, so obviously these are not voters, but politicians are always thinking of the optics, how it looks.
Yeah.
And she had a moment of honesty and told the students, we can't pay for this. There's no way we can. And when they continued to pressure her, she just basically said, look, you didn't vote for me. You're not even 18. You're not my constituents. Which the reason it made news is because that's politically courageous of her from breaking from her party. And she could have done the easy thing and like, oh yeah, kids, we're going to get it done. Hey, you hurrah. But she didn't.
Yeah.
And I got to give her kudos for that.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I mean, that's really, good to actually stand up and say, hey, despite my party being all in on this, this is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It's unobtainable. We've already talked about the Green New Deal in a prior episode. So, yeah. So I guess as much as it pains me to say this, good job, Dianne Feinstein.
Kudos. Yeah.
On that note, I think we're going to take a break, and I'm going to go vomit.
Yeah, well, like you said, got to call them how you sees them.
Yeah, I suppose we do. We'll be back right after the break.
well, sounds like Paul is having a very tough time in the restroom. Just use the toilet brush there, buddy. That was tough for him. Very tough. They're going to come take away his assault rifles. Which, according to Dianne Feinstein, is just a hunting rifle.
Alrighty, guys, we're back from the break. So I guess let's get back into the show. So recently in the news, there was also a scandal with YouTube. Now, we know a lot of people that are more, on the conservative or the right side of American politics really don't like YouTube right now because there's been a lot of censoring. Obviously, some more controversial figures have been totally kicked off of YouTube.
Yeah, I believe
entirely.
PewDiePie has been completely demonetized.
Yeah. And then other people have even had their channels like totally shut down. Like
Yeah,
I know
Alex Jones,
yeah, for one. Right winger with a beard. What's his name? My brain's just I had it right there on tip of my tongue and lost it. Alt right guy. Or kind of.
Are you talking about Sargon of Akkad?
No.
Which I think he's more centrist.
Yeah.
And I think he also was banned for a time.
He was He also recently was booted off of.
Gavin McInnes.
Gavin McInnes.
Yes, his whole career has been ruined
Yeah.
from this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, Gavin McInnes. There we go.
Yeah. I absolutely love his comedy. He's hilarious. A lot of people take him too seriously, though, and I think that's why he got booted off. A lot of this stuff, I think he's just he's a troll. He's a professional troll, and he's very funny, but people take him too seriously sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of what he says is in jest, I think.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be, some of it's kind of satire and,
Yeah.
and what have you. But, so yeah, obviously YouTube's not really liked by the conservative movement at the moment. And right now the conservative movement is trying to eat YouTube alive for what's going on with some of the channels on YouTube right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening is disturbing, quite so, and people should be somewhat outraged. But I think some of the outrage is somewhat misplaced with it being directed directly at YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like a lot of it's revenge.
Yeah. And of course, what we're referring to is the whole soft-core-ish child porn sex scandal thing.
Right. Which is essentially, it's just bizarre. It's what they did is these, and it looked like a lot of Russians were involved from what I understood. They would take these, yeah, there you go, another conspiracy
there's the Russian connection right there, except it's not with Trump, it's
they
with
would
the
take
DNC.
these videos that kids would upload.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe young girls in bathing suits or just what have you, and they would put timestamps in the comments of, oh yeah, that's what we wanted to see. Maybe it was a girl bending over or something, or what, I don't know.
So it wasn't actually like real legit child porn. It was just like scantily
No.
clad and creepy stuff.
Yes, it was basically these guys creeping on other videos.
Yeah.
They were not producing any of this stuff. Absolutely, they should be banned from YouTube. YouTube lost Disney and several other advertisers, which I actually would defend YouTube on this, because obviously if they knew it was happening, they would have taken care of it before now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they need to, monitor things a little bit better, the comment sections. I don't know how that works. But I do get this feeling from the alt-right guys online that it's just this. They think they're almost enjoying it,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think that is YouTube's fault whatsoever. They're banning the people now that they've found out. They're taking action.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a lesson learned for YouTube. Hey, we need to monitor these things a little bit better. But overall, I think that the whole revenge thing from the right wing, I don't like that.
Yeah, and I think also the kind of the notion of saying YouTube is almost implying that YouTube is supporting it.
Yes.
That I don't think is necessarily the case.
Yeah.
I don't think any reasonable, rational person does.
Well, and if we want to work towards free discourse, we can't say, oh, you censored us, so screw you, we're going to try to take you down.
Yeah.
You have to be better than that. You have to read the issues. You have to be nuanced about it. You have to understand that YouTube is not at fault here. It's some creepy Russian dudes sitting in a basement.
Yeah.
And that needs to be taken care of, and YouTube can ban their accounts, and I'm sure they are. But I just don't see the whole right wing blaming YouTube and really just jumping on this to really give YouTube a black eye. I don't like that. because it's kind of like doing the same thing that was done to you.
Yeah.
You know.
And actually, that's a good segue into another one of our topics, which is actually talking about the terrorist or ISIS sympathizer that went that was from Alabama, went to Syria, became a jihadi bride, and then now wants to come back to the United States. Now, there's a lot of controversy in the news. A lot of people on the left are saying, oh, forgive her, bring her back in the United States. And a lot of people on the right are like, ban her, leave her out of the country, to hell with her. Now, some of the facts and some of the details are still out in the wind. So where I fall on it is going to be dependent on a couple of things. And I think we're more or less in agreements on this. Although I think my stance on this is a little bit more controversial than what a lot of people would initially think.
Yeah, it's my understanding she's in a refugee camp currently in Syria because of the fall of ISIS.
Yeah, I believe she handed herself over to the YPG, or the Kurdish opposition force that was there. So,
and her father is currently residing in the U.S. in Alabama, and the whole controversy came. This goes back to the Obama administration, where she did have a U.S. passport and she had it revoked because apparently her father was a diplomat when she was born, which would mean she would not receive birthright citizenship. Apparently, this was found out when she went to Syria and they revoked her passport. So it would make her a Yemeni citizen rather than a U.S. citizen. And if that is the case, absolutely the U.S. should not let her come back. That Yemen needs to deal with that then. She needs to she needs to get back into Yemen. But we're unsure as of right now because the father claims that he was not a diplomat at that point.
Yeah. So if the father was not a diplomat at that point, then she is a citizen.
Yes.
By and large, I mean, there's no real argument on that. But if, like you said, if he was a diplomat when she was born, then that throws everything to the wind. Obviously, she should not be allowed in the country. And the reason I assuming that the father is correct, using off that judgment that he was not a diplomat at the time, the idea of the United States pulling your passport and saying, oh, that's it, there goes your citizenship, congratulations, now you're stateless, I take issue with that.
Yeah.
I also take issue with the notion of an American citizen being charged or accused of a crime, not getting to stand trial.
Right, not getting due process.
That bothers me. That really does not bode well for me. And I think it sets a really dangerous precedent because in the future, God forbid, I find myself, abroad, which I will, quite possibly residing abroad, but still wanting the ability to come back to the United States because, I mean, this is my
family, and,
family, friends, and, technically my country of origin, my home country, technically still a citizen. And that's, a right of any person that should be able to go back to their country of for which they are a citizen of. And all of a sudden, if I just doing the show, I could become persona non grata, no longer in favor. The government could say, oh, this Paul guy, we don't like him. He's a vocal terrorist. Denied entry, pull your passport, and congratulations, now I'm stateless.
Yeah.
And no due process of law, and that is very un-American.
Right.
It flies in the face of every value that we have as a republic.
I completely agree with that. We just have to wait to see because if she were an American, I would agree with you. She needs to stand trial, and if she's guilty, she needs to pay for her crimes.
Oh, of course.
And also, I believe there's an issue. She does have a child who would, if she was a citizen, also be a U.S. citizen.
Yes.
And would be allowed to come back and live with I don't know whether the child's male or female, but live with the grandpa if the mother were to go to prison.
I think she has a son, if I'm not mistaken.
And if that's the case, then that's what needs to happen. And if that's not the case, and the father were a diplomat at the time of her birth, she needs to get a Yemenese passport, and then Yemen would have to take care of that.
Oh yeah, entirely. I mean, if he was a diplomat at the time, she's a Yemeni citizen and a Yemeni's problem. Frankly,
right.
Don't.
Let's get her a Yemeni's passport.
Yeah,
and then there you go.
Yeah, exactly. So in that case, she needs to contact the Yemeni's consulate or embassy and say, "Hey, my dad was a diplomat for you guys. Give me my travel documents."
Yeah,
and square that away. That again, that's not our problem.
And this could range anywhere from the father and the mother, or the grandfather rather, and the mother simply don't want to raise the kid in Yemen, so they're trying to,
Yeah.
manipulate the way back into the U.S. system. Because the woman has apparently said that she is willing to stand trial for her crimes, but I think in the mother's mind, it's about her child.
Yeah.
And so it could be a case of she is trying to deceive people, and the grandfather, the diplomat, as well, or it could be simply a case of she did have a U.S. passport and it was revoked based upon him having a diplomat's position, but it could have expired. We're just going to have to see where it lands. So
Yeah.
it could anyway end up from being, yes, that child has a right to come to America, to you got to go to Yemen.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, if everything it does check out and she, her father was not a diplomat at the time of her birth, then yeah, she should be allowed to come back.
Yeah.
She should surrender herself to the nearest U.S. embassy, be arrested, stand trial, and go that route. And again, if her dad was a diplomat at the time, she should be, she should go to the Yemenese embassy or consulate and deal with that, because it's not our problem.
Yeah. And I don't know potentially how long she'd spend in prison, but probably a while.
Yeah, quite a while. Because, treason at worst, and, sedition and aiding and abetting at the least.
Yeah.
So, and there's really no denying that happened. But regardless, she has the right to stand trial if she's an American.
I agree.
And, we'll see how this pans out.
And this is becoming a huge problem throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
ISIS brides and families returning from, which, ladies and gentlemen, never join a terrorist group. You won't have these problems.
Yeah, but on the flip side of this, because some of the groups that are labeled as terrorist groups, I have actually even thought about joining myself.
Well, I was specifically talking about ISIS.
Oh, I know, but seriously, because at the end of the day, I support the Kurdish movement in northern Iraq and in eastern Syria and I believe western Turkey. I believe they should be entitled to a homeland, and in Iraq at least they've kind of somewhat have that with an autonomous region now as a provincial level, and they're not getting gassed by Saddam, so that's great. And the YPG and YPK were the two Kurdish militant groups which have been defending that area and are part of the national system now in northern Iraq, are labeled by the U.S. government as terrorist groups.
Even though we give them support.
I
did not know that.
Yes, we have labeled.
Because I know we militarily support them quite often.
Oh yeah, a lot of times
we'll drop bombs for them.
We'll drop bombs for them. We'll supply them with ammunition and small arms, but they are officially labeled as a terrorist group.
I did not know that.
Yeah, U.S. State Department labels them as a terrorist group. So that's our war of supporting terror.
Yeah.
Not the first time the United States has had some interesting foreign policy.
Well, they're gonna, you could, and you never know how it's going to end up. Look at the Mujahideen. You know, it was great when we were giving them, rockets to blow up Russian helicopters, but kind of spawned spawned Osama bin Laden. So and a lot of other terrorist leaders in Afghanistan. So.
But on the flip side of that, you look at the Kurds in northern Iraq, they've got streets named things like, Texas Avenue.
Yeah. Yeah.
They actually genuinely do love and support the United States.
Right.
And if you go there, as far as Muslim countries or Muslim-dominated areas, especially in the Middle East, they're very moderate, pretty chill.
Yeah. Yeah. I've worked with, in Nashville, there's a small Kurdish population. I've worked with several of them. It's, and I think this is a lot of the reason Mattis put in his resignation, because he felt like pulling the troops out too early, with people like the Yazidis, people like the Kurds, we would really be screwing them over, basically.
Yeah.
However, through what I've read, it's pretty much a lot of these generals agree, regardless of whether they're conservative, and because you have conservative generals, liberal generals, but they all basically agree that if you get involved in these things, you have to be there 20 to 30 years to make it come out. And the American public simply does not have the stomach for that.
No.
And that's on both sides. That's conservatives or liberals. Americans don't have the stomach to be in a conflict for 30 years. But that's just the brutal truth about it. If you really want to help these people, that's how long you have to stay.
Yeah. Yeah, because you've got to totally, fundamentally almost change an entire generation.
Right.
For anything to take root.
Right.
And even then, it's a 50-50 shot.
Yeah, you have to let that generation grow up in freedom to understand it, and and it's a tough thing. And this nation building stuff, that's what it takes. And if you want to help these people, that's what it takes.
Yeah.
And I admit I'm not really for it, but I also don't think we should do like we did with the Kurds, get involved with them, help them, and go, no.
Yeah.
You know.
Or worse yet, like we did in the first Gulf War, we're like, yeah, go and attack Saddam, and we go in, we're rolling. It's like, okay, Saddam, don't do this again. Bye.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, part of this entire population's gone in and fought against Saddam, and we leave, and Saddam's like, okay, now guys, you fought against me, gassing time.
Yeah, and I understand why the U.S. did that, because they understood the power vacuum that was going to happen.
Mhm.
They basically understood that ISIS or something like it would come about at that time. So they said, we proved our point. We proved we can take you out anytime. Don't mess with Kuwait. We're going to go home. But
Well-
like you said, the problem is the people.
Yeah, and the fact the U.S. government specifically said it, hey, Kurds, rise up and go after Saddam,
Mm-hmm.
that was not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we just came in, spanked Saddam, and left, and had not told them to rise up, they could have at least smugly laughed and said, oh, good job, USA, and they probably wouldn't have been gassed, at least not as heavily.
Right.
So,
Yeah, interventionist U.S. policy is definitely not a good thing. But both sides are guilty of it.
Yeah.
Both sides are guilty of it, because you also have the people who say, "What about the human rights abuses that we need to go take care of?" Well, you're going to get in that 30-year cycle again.
well, even so, the human rights abuses that we don't get involved in, these happen all over the world all the time. They've been happening for decades upon decades.
Mhm.
Within our modern world. You don't hear anybody saying, let's storm into North Korea and free people from human rights violations. Let's storm into parts of China and do the same thing. Let's storm in, I don't know, let's storm into South Sudan. Nobody's talking about that.
Right.
you know.
Because I think North Korea and China are probably a bad example, because the consequences would be so high. Because North Korea could obliterate Seoul if
Yeah.
But South Sudan, the consequences would not be that high.
Yeah,
and you're right. The picking and the choosing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll say, oh yeah, we'll get involved in Yugoslavia, in the 90s, yeah, because Slobodan Milosevic is doing ethnic cleansing there. So yeah, human rights violation there. We'll step in a little bit. We'll fiddle fart around the Middle East, but there's no incentive. Because obviously there's an incentive to stabilize the Balkan region of Europe, because right there on the Mediterranean, there's a lot of more, especially at the time, more prosperous countries such as Italy and Greece right in the region as well. So
and there's NATO implications.
and
as well.
NATO, and well, in the early 90s, there wasn't as much, because Yugoslavia was Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously now there is with a lot.
Well, no, I'm saying the NATO states would have pressured the U.S. to take care of
Oh,
the
yeah.
situations that's on their borders, that's close to them.
Oh yeah, I can directly.
So there's political pressure.
Yeah, exactly. But so there's that, or we'll get involved in the Middle East because of strategic importance with this, that, and the other. But other human rights violations, who cares? It happens. Stuff. We got. Even no matter how you feel about it, some people might joke about it. It's wild. I do get the slight humor aspect. Obviously, loss of life is not really that funny at the end of the day. When you address it seriously. But you got Pinochet in South America throwing people out of helicopters. I mean,
Yeah.
But
Although the
that's
joke
okay.
is, how do you take care of a communist? You take them up in a helicopter.
Yeah.
You know?
And like I said, yeah, I get the joke of it. But at the same time, I mean, in all honesty, people shouldn't be getting killed,
Yeah.
especially for just political beliefs.
Well, and like you said, you look at so many places in Africa,
Oh yeah,
which I agree that the situation in Africa is unwinnable, but the situation in the Middle East is unwinnable. But we choose to go there.
At the end of the day, I think one of the easiest things that could be done in the Middle East and in Africa would be to redraw lines on a map. Frankly, would be the best thing for everybody involved.
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah.
Because a lot of these places, they were, this is going to be me railing on actual imperialism for once. Because the United States is always, touted as being imperialist, but if the United States was imperialist, they were probably one of the worst at it.
yeah, considering England, the sun never set on the British Empire.
Yeah, I mean, the United States does have a few overseas protectorates. At one point we had the Philippines. We still have Guam and Marshall Islands, and but
Oh, yeah, it's been pretty Mickey Mouse compared to the European
right
powers.
between Spain, the Netherlands,
Portugal
the UK,
had a
Portugal.
bigger empire.
Yeah. So, I mean, but yeah, all these countries came into places like Africa and into some degree the Middle East as well, and just especially after the First World War with the Middle East, and like, oh, let's just draw lines on a map. Oh, this is yours, this is mine. Let's just play in a game here. This is your, just passing it back and forth without any real understanding of the people living there, the people actually residing in country, the culture, the demographics, and everything else. It's like, oh, the two warring tribes, yeah, we're going to cut you in half here, and now you guys that are fighting, part of your friends are over here, part of your friends over here. You're in one country, and fight a war with each other, because it's fun. And that's really what's happened. I mean, so without, going in and saying, okay, you're this tribe and this group, here's your country, and then redrawing the maps, I mean, that's kind of what happened between North and South Sudan recently. South Sudan was, 2010 that they seceded from the North and broke away into their own country, their own state. Why? Because you had ethnic and religious conflicts within the country. Yeah. Because you had two warring factions that are grouped in the same country together. It's like, well, this is going to be...
diversity is their strength.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was a bad joke.
Well, I mean, there is a little bit of an argument to be said for certain types of diversity.
Oh, diversity of thought, absolutely.
And even, diversity of thought, diversity of culture to an extent. But there needs to be, within a nation state, there needs to be some sort of unifying cultural aspects.
Yes, exactly. And that's where the joke comes in is, obviously, you can't, say you marry a woman that, doesn't like any of the same things you do, is politically opposite of you. That's not great for a relationship in the long run. You can have one or two things different, but somebody that you're at odds with literally everything, that doesn't make your strength. Like you said, you have to have a unifying principle there. Yeah. Something.
Exactly.
In the U.S., what it should be, although this is starting to dissolve with the left, is the patriotism of you are of the U.S. You can be any religion, any color, but what unites us is the ideology of freedom and the Constitution, and we're starting to lose that, unfortunately. But that's what made us a successful melting pot. Whereas, I heard somebody say the other day, they're right. They're like, we used to be a melting pot. Now we're a mosaic.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty good description. Because as a melting pot, you don't even have to melt at the same temperature, and that's fine. Let's use metals, for example, right? You got tin over here, aluminum, copper, gold, steel, iron. You got all these things we're getting thrown in the pot. Well, tin's going to melt at a much lower density and totally absorb into everything. Whereas some of the harder metals like steel or there's some titanium in there, it's not going to take a little while for that one to melt. But at the same time, they're going to retain some of its initial bit, some of its initial culture. That's fine to an extent, but you need to absorb a little bit of it. You need to absorb the ideas of freedom and tolerance of others. And I said tolerance. I didn't say full on acceptance. There is a difference.
There is a big difference.
Tolerance is a really important thing to have. You should tolerate everybody, even if it's something you don't like.
Yes.
It's like, I tolerate the fact they sell Brussels sprouts in the store. I don't like them. I'm not going to buy them, but I'll tolerate the fact they're sitting next to the carrots.
Right.
Somebody else can buy them. That's fine. Yeah. I don't have to buy the Brussels sprouts. They're not for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the end of the day. It's what it is. It's maybe not the best analogy. Maybe it is a good analogy. I don't know. But that's kind of how it is. I think they should be sold. They should totally have every right to be sold in the supermarket. I'm not going to buy them, though.
Yeah. So. Well, it's funny what you're seeing with a lot of these immigrants. It's not the first generation immigrants.
Oh, no, it never is.
That are separating themselves. They want to be here. They want to, they're working hard to become American. It's the second generation immigrants that seem to say, oh, well, the American society is garbage, it's trash, and they become these insular, like Muslim communities are very bad about this. They become this community where they want to move here for the freedom and the economic aspects. But they move here and they create these insular communities that they want to basically impose the same laws as they had wherever they're coming from, which is what made them flee that place in the first place. They don't understand that, and we didn't used to, it's the whole trope of when, in the 90s, the Russian guy, like, yeah, I'm super American, love race car. They really were trying hard to be American. And now you get a lot of these communities, they're just, they're self-segregating. And they just break into these little, and they don't ever assimilate within the culture.
Well, not only are you seeing this with foreign nationals and second and third, subsequent generations in the United States, but you're also seeing this in amongst the American population itself. you're seeing what I'm going to coin the term as liberal flight.
Mm-hmm.
So you got places like Los Angeles, Chicago, places with draconian laws, especially now starting to come in place and really just, especially economically, trashing the way of life of things. And these people are moving to places like Nashville, which is made our traffic miserable.
Yeah.
Our roads are now falling apart. They used to be nice, and now
they used to be rated some of the best roads in the nation,
and now they're absolute trash. So we have so many people driving on them all the time. They are atrocious. I've not seen roads this bad since I was in Detroit. Detroit is some bad roads.
Arkansas is what I would liken them to, which is super poor. So
and all of a sudden now it's like, hey, let's vote in all these same policies we just fleed because, despite the fact we moved here for better economic opportunities and everything's wonderful now, let's vote in all these negative policies.
Yeah, they're trying to duplicate what they came from.
Exactly, that they left on purpose because it was terrible.
Yeah. It's a good example is there's been some controversy over the civilian oversight committee for the police department here in Nashville. Well, they voted that in, which I voted against it because I understood it was a terrible idea just to get random people from the community to basically be a kangaroo court for cops.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing. And of course now they stripped them of subpoena power, and which they shouldn't have the power of a court. That's insane. So they're actually going in the right direction with it. So now it's basically just, it's powerless. They have no fangs, which is good. But you have so many people who say, oh well, we need to control these police. It's the same stuff you see in Chicago. These ideas.
Yeah.
And then they'll say stuff. I love this one. There was a cop who got arrested for DUI. They say, see, this is the problem with cops because they decided not to prosecute him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like somebody made the point, it wasn't a cop who decided not to prosecute him. It was a cop who arrested him. So, you're conflating these issues with cops that may be a deeper justice system problem, but you can't blame the cops for every justice system problem.
No, because obviously it was the DA that's going to decide to prosecute or not.
Right. It wasn't the police. Like I said, the police arrested the guy.
Yeah.
The fact that he got off had nothing to do with the police. It was out of their hands.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of these conflations with the justice system problems are going to be taken out on the police. And obviously the police are very upset about that. They don't want justice system problems to be taken out on them. They're the front end of it, not the back end of it.
Exactly. I'm not to say that there's not justice system problems, because there are plenty of those we could talk about. But at the end of the day, in that instance, if the cops arrested him, the fact that they failed to prosecute, that falls on the DA's or the assistant DA's shoulders. That's not the cop's fault.
Right. Yeah. You cannot blame the police for that. Yeah. Or they hold up. There was another one. The cop shot a guy in the back, which he did shoot him in the back, but the guy had a gun out, and had been threatening him initially. And once again, they want the cop to be charged with murder. I'm like, maybe get fired. But the fact that the guy had a gun in his hand and running through a neighborhood, he could have shot anybody. Mm-hmm. He could have shot a kid. He could have tried to mug somebody just the next street over. So, these are more nuanced. That's why we need to let the professionals handle it. The internal affairs, the justice system. And if there's problems with the justice system, let's fix that.
Yeah.
Let's not get people in the community just giving their 2 cents on everything.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a quick break here real quick, and we'll get back to you guys after the break. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the content. If you are, make sure to press that like and subscribe button right down there. And if there's any material and stuff you would like to see us cover, we're more than happy to do that for you as well. Hope to have some new content coming out for our Patreon subscribers. Those of you that are, in the mood to do that. We also have one of those. Should be pretty easy to find us, the Donut Hole Show. And, yeah.
And once we get some more subscribers, we'll probably start a merch store, do some mugs, some hats, things like that. We're just now starting out. Hopefully this episode got our audio quality fixed, and continue to move forward for you guys and offer more and more every week.
Yep. So thanks again, guys. Alrighty, we're back from the break. So I guess let's kind of segueing back into what we were talking about before with people leaving these, places like Chicago and New York and L.A. Remington Arms Company, who's been set up in New York now for, I think, since 1815, if memory serves me correct.
It's been a very long time. Yeah.
They're actually leaving their New York facility and exporting a lot of jobs to Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the AR-15 platform is banned in New York City, and Remington does manufacture that particular type of rifle. It's not the only rifle, obviously, they manufacture, but that's one of the platforms that they do work on. And yeah, they are moving a lot of production down to Alabama.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I saw that was recently in the news, because they're actually, while they talked about doing it before, they're actually going through with it now, and have already started to set up a factory in Alabama. And this isn't a thing that's, as you recently saw yourself, was kind of buried in the news.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, Google it, and you can't really. Apparently, this decision was in the news several years ago when it was made, but now that it's actually happening and the actions are being taken, you just don't see anything about it. You know, you had mentioned it to me, and I searched, and I just really couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
It ended up, I gleaned the information from old articles when the decision was made, and then they happened to mention 2018, 2019 is when this move was going to happen.
Yeah, so it's actually, the move is underway. You'd figure the actual move is newsworthy, and nope.
Right. I would think the actual move is more newsworthy than the decision, because you hear this in business news a lot of times. Oh, so and so says they're going to do this, nothing ever happens. You know? But yeah, it's just more of the, you know, why would Amazon left New York? Because, you know, we already discussed that, but why would a business want to do place where they do business in a place that is against their business?
Exactly. And New York's had such anti-gun policies in effect, and this is a company has employs a lot of people in New York State, and just they've made it so difficult for them that they're like, you know what, we're done with this.
And it's my understanding that these are fairly good jobs as well. That because I know we had Beretta come to a small town close to Nashville here. And it's my understanding these are fairly good jobs. They pay fairly well.
Yeah, we do have a couple of gun manufacturers here. We have Beretta here now. We also have Barrett, which is based in Tennessee as well. So there are, it seems that all these gun manufacturers are starting to relocate into areas that are either more gun friendly and or more business friendly.
Yeah, and it's a win-win if it's both.
Yeah,
and especially for you're mentioning Alabama, they're going to have a lot of labor there. People are needing the jobs in Alabama. And it's just a win-win,
Yeah, and moreover, the jobs, won't be unionized, so there won't have to. The labor cost will be lower. They're going to have a better clientele base for the product in and of itself. And at the end of the day, it's just going to be a better thing. But at the same time, it does cost a lot of money to move a company from one state to another.
Absolutely.
And I think that was one of the things that one of the reasons Remington held out in New York as long as they did. This is where they traditionally have done this. The same factory basically since 1819 or 1815 or something like that, which is a long run of production in a single place. I'm saying, this is where we founded. This is where our history is. I don't know. They might leave their museum there. I'm not sure, but and to totally uproot and say, you know what, we're done with this. That speaks volumes, because even with all the savings from the business aspect of things, it's going to take a lot of time for that to pay off as far as, cost to move, cost to do all this. Despite the savings and the better business environment, it's still going to cost a lot of money to do all that.
Absolutely. It's going to take them years to recover from it.
Yeah. So that just kind of shows you how bad some of these places are. And then again, for people that, like we were talking about before, for people to leave these places because of bad business environments in general, as far as corporations and stuff, and then move to these other places with great, or considerably better business regulations, and then be like, oh, let's just incorporate or to change everything to be like it was where we fled from. It's ridiculous.
Which is why I can see a situation like, for example, here in Nashville, where Nashville is going to be not very friendly to business in the near future if they keep going the way they're going.
Yeah.
So Nashville's still a hot city, though, draws a lot of people. What you're going to see, I think, is them coming to surrounding counties. That may not be under those same regulations that Davidson County is. I know as a real estate investor, I don't want to mess around with anything in Davidson County, because the regulations are so much more than, say, Sumner or Robertson County or anywhere else around, really.
Yeah, the surrounding counties.
So you used to have a situation around here where people lived in the surrounding counties and went to work in Nashville. I could foresee a situation where people want to live in Nashville and work in the surrounding counties because of that.
Yeah, we're going to see that. But the worst thing about that is I almost hate I hate to say it like this, but it kind of is the case. It's like when people take these ideas from the places they're fleeing and go to a place where things are better economically, and then they set up shop somewhere, and usually in a large city. You see this in Memphis. You obviously are starting to see this in Nashville now with everybody moving here. And then they start to move out to the surrounding counties for various things, whether it's for work or to live there and be close to Nashville. It's almost like a cancer that seems to spread throughout a state. And it's really bad.
Yeah, it's honestly it's kind of what's happening in Texas, and they think Texas may actually turn blue at some point. And believe it or not, it's everybody thinks it's tends to be this immigrant Latino population, but that's not really the case. What's really more so the case is liberals moving there from other states.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the demographics in Texas of Latinos, they're 50-50. As like anywhere in the U.S., half of them are conservative, half of them are liberal, and but it's the demographics of all these people moving that's causing it to shift like that. And to me, there's just a disconnect in these people's minds. They find a place like Nashville, they say, oh, it's so great. Things are so, real estate's affordable, the taxes are low, it's a great place to be. And then they move here, and because of the demand, the real estate goes through the roof, the taxes start to go up for all these programs they want to pay for.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if they don't understand what they're fleeing from. They don't do enough research into it.
Yeah, there's a total disconnect.
Yeah.
It's, wanting the cake and eating it too.
Yeah.
And obviously can't do that.
Yeah.
So, and then one of the other things we talked about, we were talking about America's goofy foreign policy, which we've discussed a little bit earlier, particularly when we were talking about the girl from Alabama. Something else that was fairly recently, it's been a few weeks at this point in the news. It was a bipartisan committee that wants to bring this before a vote in Congress. I believe Pelosi was on it, Rubio was on it, Ted Cruz was on it, and there's a handful of others as well. So bipartisan support in this committee. Basically, they want to bring it before Congress to vote on an official invitation given to Tsai Ing-wen, the president of Taiwan. So when it comes to the way this has worked out, and obviously since the late 70s, the United States has broken diplomatic relations with Taiwan in favor of the PRC, mainland China. So we have no official channels of between our two governments. We have these unofficial cultural offices. So no embassy there, no diplomats. Again, that's kind of how this has worked, which actually made it really interesting for me. Last time I had to renew my passport, I was out of the country and had to go to the American Institute in Taipei to get that squared away.
Right.
Which makes it kind of interesting. Basically they handle all those duties without it being an official channel. But they want to invite President Tsai Ing-wen to, before Congress, to talk about, various, our unofficial relations with each other. Now, officially or unofficially, really hard to put this, we have a really dicey policy currently between China and Taiwan. We don't support interventionism or full-on independence for Taiwan as far as official doctrine, as an agreement with the PRC, mainland China. And but we also have made a commitment to the people of Taiwan to defend them against any aggression.
Right.
So if China were just all of a sudden to roll across the Taiwan Straits, the United States, and actually Japan now too, has signed on to say, we're going to help you out.
Right.
In dealing with this, to aid in the defense of the people of Taiwan, not the government. Interesting.
Right.
And we already know that Tsai Ing-wen was the first person to call President Trump and congratulate him, which he erroneously took the phone call and said, oh, thanks, and then realized what a mistake he made.
Yeah.
Which did not make Beijing very happy. But you've got some various schools of thought on this. I mean, obviously, if President Tsai Ing-wen, she would actually either have to, accept or decline the offer. But just making the offer in of itself could prove somewhat tumultuous and in a violation of our agreement with China not to have any diplomatic relations with Taiwan. So I don't know. What do you think about it?
It's a tough situation because obviously, like you said, you have unofficial relations, and I mean, it's a first world country. It's a player in the world.
Yeah.
It's not like it's something you can just ignore. If it were some small African nation that had little GDP, you could kind of just ignore it. But it's a situation that's going to have to be faced honestly by the whole world.
Yeah.
Just simply because of their status as a first world nation and
very massive economy.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be faced by the entire world, and I understand that the U.S. is trying to have relations with them, but also enable China to save face. But there's gonna come a point where I don't think that can happen, and not just with the U.S., the whole world.
Yeah,
there's gonna have to be a day for them where the world's gonna start saying, "Hey, this is a separate country with their own economy and their own people," and I could see a day where the world starts recognizing that. If the U.S. doesn't do it first, perhaps European powers, other folks do.
Yeah. So I don't know whether this committee ruling will go anywhere, but it'll be really interesting to see where it ends up.
I think you're going to need international support for it as well.
Yeah.
Because China is obviously going to be pissed at the U.S.
Yeah.
I mean, already. I'm sure already they're mad just that this is even being brought up.
Yeah.
However, though, if you get a international outcry to kind of just basically tell China, like, back off, it's going to take an international community. The U.S. can't just do that. They're going to have to form a coalition, diplomatic coalition of saying, hey, let's open up these relations.
Yeah. That might. Well, hopefully we'll see something like that in the future.
Yeah.
But there's no telling. I know right now there's definitely a little bit of an anti-American sentiment in China right now, and with President Xi Jinping. Actually, I like President Xi Jinping, the current administration in the PRC. There's the growing nationalist sentiment.
Yeah.
Which you could call communist, but it's again economically not so much.
Yeah. It's a strange thing how some of the university kids in China are getting backed to traditional communism, where Xi Jinping is cracking down on it and saying, no, we're not getting back to traditional communism. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, but I mean, there's still all the nationalist propaganda with the hammer and sickle and all this. It's like, oh, we're, China with, we're communists with Chinese characteristics.
Yeah.
Being capitalism. But still a very strong nationalist sentiment, and actually somewhat of a growing anti-American and anti-Western sentiment as well. Especially with, obviously, right now we're currently a bit of a trade war with China, with the current Trump administration and their counterparts in Beijing. So it'll be interesting to see how all this develops. It's going to play. I know it's not really one of those things that's big news, but it's one of those things I focus in on because obviously I'm planning on relocating back to Taiwan at some point in the future.
And economically, it has huge consequences for the entire world. And China has been fudging a lot of things for a long time.
Yeah.
The currency manipulation. And I'm very against generally what Trump does with his tariffs because I think it's ridiculous.
Oh, I do too. It's absolutely.
However, with China, I'm going to make a little bit of an exception because some of the American goods were tariffed at an exorbitant rate in China.
Oh yeah, especially luxury goods.
Now, when Trump's doing this to Canada, and it's ridiculous. Just but with China using it as a disciplinary tactic for like, hey, you're going to do that, we're going to do it too. I not necessarily 100%, but 70% agree with it.
Well, it's at least a little bit more understandable. In that
it's understandable.
And like you said, Taiwan's one of the it's a first world country. I think they're in the top 10 economically in the world as far as production. And they're just slightly behind the United States in the Global Freedom Index. So I mean, we're talking about a place that should be recognized.
Well, I mean, you can go into. I know this sounds funny, but you can go into any Walmart in the country and find something made in Taiwan. And for such a small place, that's saying something about their economy.
Well, moreover, I mean, most people, what they're carrying around in their pocket, they'll have something that's made in Taiwan because half the components in their cell phone are going to be made there, and half your computers are going to be made there. I mean, we've got, worldwide name brand stuff from that are, Taiwanese companies like MSI, Asus, Acer, HTC, Asus, I think I said them already. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these, computer companies and electronics companies, and that's just the electronic sector alone. I know they're also really big into the manufacture of bicycles as well. It's a big industry as far as like mountain bikes and like road bikes and stuff like that.
And I think we're going to see reactions from China because as China's economy continues to grow, obviously they're not going to be the cheapest place to manufacture things. And China's going to, start pushing back more in their interests because that's how they grew their economy. But now it's as any of these countries do that go through this model, they're going to have to start changing.
Yeah.
Because their economy is large enough to the point now where they can't just manufacture cheap goods for the rest of the world and make bank off of that. Because they have a larger economy, they need more going on than just that.
Oh, exactly. And you're already starting to see this right now in China. A lot of companies are, because China has been following that export-led growth model economy, which is great getting you built up. But at a certain point, you reach like almost a critical mass where that is no longer, because your currency is too valuable. Labor is starting to become expensive. People, their standard of living has improved to a certain level, and at the end of the day, they're not willing to do the jobs for peanuts like they used to be able to. So you're seeing a lot of these manufacturing jobs now currently actually leaving China and going to places like Vietnam, which right now in Vietnam is their economy is doing pretty well. I mean, there's a lot of
and it's a good thing for them.
Yeah, it is, and they're also one of those communist countries that are starting to adopt some of those Chinese characteristics, aka capitalism.
But I think what China is going to be afraid of is becoming like Japan. Because Japan grew and grew and grew, but as soon as their electronics industry and car industry, which are still strong, but they're not like they were in the 80s. Obviously, the 80s, it was, and Japan, rather, their economy has been stagnant for a very long time because they have really not transferred away from that. They got to the apex of that, and then they kind of just, like you said, the standard of living went up, the wages went up, and they've been very stagnant for a long time because they're still relying on that electronics and that car manufacturing.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas a place like the U.S. or Europe has switched to a service-based economy for their own people because the people in the country here are rich enough to support that.
Yeah, moreover, and we were already starting to see things like that because, I mean, Japan's already another thing that they export to Taiwan as far as manufacturing. There's a lot of their manufacturing jobs for some of their lower-end motorcycles and things like that, like for some of their entry-level Kawasaki's and what have you. They're actually those parts and bikes are made in Taiwan, like the motorcycles and stuff. And then in to draw another correlation between mainland China and Japan, both are started to reach that threat. Like Japan has already reached it, and China's already reached that threshold starting to reach that threshold where goods are becoming a little bit too expensive to do domestically, and there's already becoming some really high end or established brands in China, and couple that with the same problem Japan's facing, which is an aging population.
Yeah.
Obviously China had the one-child policy for a long time, and they, as such, they're a large segment of the population is now aged considerably. They're starting to get up there in years, and there's not as large of a younger workforce, a younger demographic in the population. And even Taiwan's experiencing this to an extent as well. And actually, it's actually so bad in Taiwan right now, they're actually starting to close a few universities even.
And that's going to be a problem worldwide, which is what you see. Why Angela Merkel says they want more immigration into Europe because of declining populations. The U.S. actually has a pretty stagnant population, but if you went the U.S. as far as traditional demographics, African Americans, whites, people that have been here a long, long time, it's declining. And then you're seeing what is sustaining us is immigration and the Latino population. But this tends to be an effect. I think it crosses all cultural boundaries. It seems as a country becomes first world and they become comfortable, birth rates decline.
Of course.
And also education, birth control, people focus on their careers, family planning, whereas in poorer countries, they just have kids. It's just life. You just, that's what you know.
Well, it's also in a lot of these poorer countries, third and second world countries, having multiple kids is kind of an insurance policy.
Yeah.
You have, in the United States, you have one or two kids because it's expensive to have kids. Over there, it's not as expensive to have kids because you can't provide as many opportunities for them. So it's, have 5 or 10, and hopefully one or two of them become a doctor and help out later on in life.
Yeah, because over there, all you have to do for the kid is feed them.
Yeah, pretty
You
much
know.
feed them and send them off to school.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah, I actually had a Mexican immigrant friend I worked with, Miguel, and he was American citizen. He was a legal immigrant. But somebody asked him, he had something like 10 kids. And he even said, he goes, hey, I figure one of them's got to turn out to be good.
Yeah.
And I think that was just traditionally what he grew up believing. Is hey, one of them's going to be able to take care of me when I'm older.
Exactly. And that's kind of the same notion that you had seen, in a lot of these countries. And then again, once they become, first world countries, they reach a point where that's not really viable. You want to have one or two kids maybe, and you want to provide them with all these opportunities so that they both are successful, as opposed to throwing darts at a board basically and hoping one of them sticks.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's going to be, once the entire world gets up to a certain standard, that's going to have to, and I don't think it's really a problem, because we do need to decline the population. I mean, it's too much worldwide. The only reason we're keeping everybody alive, people are down on GMOs, but it's the only reason the world has the population it does now. If it wasn't for GMOs, we wouldn't be able to feed. I mean, we are just recently coming to an age in the world where we no longer have starvation. That's caused by lack of food. We have starvation caused by war, problems in the supply chain, but we don't have starvation caused by lack of food. There's plenty of food for everybody in the world. So we are going to get to a point where the population is going to decline, which is good for us, good for the planet. But how do we deal with that when our whole economy is built upon growth?
Well, at the same time, and with the way things are moving along, I don't necessarily think a country needs to have an increasing population constantly. And I think necessarily a massive immigration policy is not necessarily the best thing. I mean, I'm pro-immigration, for people. I'm not saying we should not have immigrants or anything like that, because I think immigrants can be great. But at the same time, I think just willy-nilly, like Angela Merkel in Germany is like, oh, just open the floodgates. That's problematic.
Right. And it also seems like a Band-Aid to the economic fix. Like, yeah, it'll work in the short run, because you're expanding your customer base for every company. There's more people to buy the goods, more jobs. I understand. But that's only a short-term Band-Aid. There's only so much you could do.
Yeah. But also with automation and various things that are moving along the lines with that, and artificial intelligence, I think there'll be a need for less jobs. So the fact that populations in some areas will decline and there'll be less jobs, I think it will kind of reach that equilibrium, and I think everything will be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. It's just growing pains. And the world population needs to decline. And I mean, you see the rivers of trash going out into the ocean. Well, if you have half the amount of people, even if the pollution's the same rate, you have half the amount of trash.
Yeah.
So just things like that. It's just better for the world in general, but it's going to take some growing pains.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the program. If you did, make sure you press the like and subscribe button down there. Thank you guys for your continued support. Hopefully, you guys have noticed a slight improvement in the audio quality. We've actually taken a few steps in that direction. So we've implemented that today using the same microphones we've been using pretty much the whole time. This is the same sound that's been coming out of the headphones here. So now you guys are seeing...
Hopefully that translates.
Yeah, hopefully it translates, and you can see our frustrations we've had really since the beginning with getting the audio where it needs to be. Trying to record it directly into the computer has not been working out really well. So we've resorted to a dedicated audio recorder. So hopefully that has cleaned things up a little bit and made the overall presentation a little bit better. If there's anything you guys would like to see in future episodes, have us talk about, we'd be more than happy to cover those things. And if you're in the Nashville area and you might want to be on the show, shoot us an email or message us in the comment section, something like that. Hit us up on Facebook, and that might be fun. So anyway, guys, from our studios here in Nashville, I'd like to wish you guys a good night, and thanks for joining us.
Have a good night.
Should we do a commercial?